Hello everybody, Unholy Vision here from Venomous Pictures, and as you can see in front of me, you have a CentOS 7 installation here. This is a Linux distro, of course, so this guide here will sort of be a walkthrough of the installation process for this particular distro for a more desktop-oriented, not a server, which a lot of people use CentOS for, but when you get your media all burnt and you are ready to put it in here, this is basically what it'll look like. It'll count down at first, but for me, I'm just already sort of moved the menu, so the countdown will go away. We'll select the install CentOS 7 here and move along. Alright, so we got started here. We have our selection of our language and basically our language for the OS and the keyboard. So what you select here will affect your keyboard and your actual what you read and everything around the operating system. So you select the United Kingdom, United States, whatever, it'll all affect it. Okay, so we got our date and time, keyboard, language support, all this other stuff, but let's get to date and time here. So we've got our big map. You select your region of what you want here, wherever the heck you are in the world. You select your city. If you're in the Americas stuff, you can click on it and sort of move it around to different time zones there. But for me, I'm gonna go with New York. And then at the bottom left, we have the clock in general. So you can change it from a 24-hour clock or a 12-hour clock, whichever your preference is. I'm going to stick with the 12. And then I'm going to go over here with time. You got your date, your time, sync to the actual internet. You can turn that off if you want, but I would suggest you just leave that on. Now we have our initialization source, the keyboard and all that is already set because we did that in the get-go, right? So initialization source is already found, but our source software selection is set to minimal by default. And there is a lot of selections in here, and a lot of them pertain to servers, which, like I said in the beginning, this is sort of a server-oriented OS, but there are some people that use it as a regular desktop due to its stability. So when we're on here as a desktop, what do we want to use? We want to use Gnome or KDE in this particular ISO that I have here. Gnome is a little bit easier on your hardware. KDE takes a little bit more of a toll. So if you have a really, really low like laptop or something not like fancy expensive parts, you might want to use Gnome. And we go to the right over here. It's got add-ons and so on and so forth that you'll want to select and get whatever you need. In our case, since we're doing a desktop like computer, we'll want internet applications, of course, and we'll want the KDE applications most likely for using KDE, and we'll want multimedia stuff because that'd be like your media players and so on and so forth. You might want to use Office Suite, but you don't have to. Security stuff and the compatibility libraries would be wise. If you go back to GNOME, it's pretty much the same process. You just select GNOME applications and whatever else. And like I was saying about the Office Suite stuff, you don't really have to use that, but that'd be something like LibreOffice. And let's move on here. It'll sync to our installation source, and it's back to where it's not caution. And now it changed the package installation right here to the KDE Plasma workspace, and it synced our stuff back up. And let's go to KDump. KDump is sort of a kernel dump log situation where if something happens, there's a kernel panic, you have a problem, it'll dump all that information that's stored in the memory that you assign and let you sort of know what happened. You can set the different results here, like how much memory you want to reserve, but honestly, I wouldn't really mess with this unless you know what you're doing. You don't want to put too much. You want to up this only if you have a good portion of RAM and you know a little bit more what you're doing. So for a first time setup, I would just leave that as automatic and move along. And of course, leave kdump enabled, and it should be 128 by default if you were fiddling around with that. Alright, so we did the kdump stuff. Let's get into, it's back to normal. It's enabled like it should be. Let's move to the hard drive installation destination. We have our hard drives up here. For me, I only have one. You may have more. That's depending on how many hard drives and stuff you have in there, or if you have a partition already for something. Be very careful when you're in here. Don't check off something. When you have a check on it, that means it's going to partition it. And if you don't know what you're doing, you don't want to delete everything you have on a drive. But in this case, I'm not really going to show you how to partition different things and just use automatic right here and not do a configuration. Anyway, this encrypt my data here. I would not check that. While that is in some cases a good feature if you're wanting encryption, I would not suggest that for a desktop, because to recover your data, it'll be so much harder. It will slow things down in some instances, and overall, just not worth it. Just skip over it, forget it, and move along. You need to go to network and host name and turn our actual network on. If you don't turn this on, it won't be working out of the box pretty much. So we'll need to turn our network on. If you have like a wireless card or something, you'd have to mess with these settings here. Usually I wouldn't suggest start with a network card. Linux is kind of a pain sometimes with network cards if you don't know what cards to get and so on and so forth. So always start with a wired connection from the get-go. And be sure to turn that on, take that on, and then we'll get out of here. Now that we set up everything, we'll begin the installation. And it'll go through its little process here. While you're setting up these two user settings up top, you'll want to set a root password. You'll need it for installing packages and doing other root access stuff. And try to make it not an easy password, and make it somewhat long, but make it as long as you can remember. Something you can remember, and be sure to remember this password. I can't emphasize enough on that. But in my case, I'm just going to make a little weak password, because this is a virtual machine for me, so I don't really mind. Alright, so I got my password. And okay, it says the 7 characters for me. I'm just going to have to do a double click on the done so I can get out of here. And it'll just accept. And then you'll have a user account. You don't have to do a full name if you don't want to. But I'm going to skip that myself. And you see I do a capital. Don't do that necessarily. It's not wise to do your username as capitalized, because everything is sort of case sensitive here. So remember that with your passwords as well. I wouldn't make your stuff as administrator. And you'll need your password here, again, for this particular account. And you will want to make this a different password than your actual root account. And then we'll go back. It's still doing the initialization. Alright, so we've got successfully installed. This is what it should look like after it's completed. And what we'll need to do is actually reboot. You'll go down to the reboot button and reboot your computer. This is what you should be presented with as soon as it reboots. You'll have two options. You'll want to select the top one. You'll boot in to what will be your login screen. We'll just select our account and we'll log in. There you have it. CentOS 7 has now been installed. Thanks for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe. This is Unholy Vision signing out.